Imagine being so incredibly good at loving other people that it actually becomes your greatest disguise.
Yeah, that is a heavy thought right out of the gate.
It really is. Today, we are doing a deep dive into this really profound paradox how being the ultimate caregiver, the one everyone relies on, could actually be a highly evolved survival mechanism to avoid ever having to look at yourself.
It's a fascinating topic.
We are exploring the archetypal great mother energy. And specifically, we're looking at this through the deeply psychological and honestly spiritual experience of a woman named Holly Ella Golden. The mission for this deep dive is to unpack something incredibly uncomfortable but so universally human.
Right.
How our outward devotion to others can function as this masterful, almost undetectable form of self-avoidance.
It is a striking paradox for sure. And we really need to clarify the baseline here right away. Because when we use the word avoidance, people immediately get
Oh,
defensive.
totally. They think you're calling them manipulative or selfish.
Exactly. And this isn't about conscious avoidance or like manipulative behavior where someone is actively running away from their problems by aggressively meddling in someone else's life.
Right? Like a busybody.
Yeah, exactly. We're talking about someone whose very nature, their actual baseline operating system, is to build and to hold and sustain. Their outward devotion is so fluent and genuine that it functions as totally authentic love.
Okay, but
But simultaneously, because it is so consuming, it acts as a way to avoid ever having to turn that exact same, intense, high-quality attention inward.
okay, let's unpack this, because that is a lot to wrap your head around. It makes me think of an analogy, like someone who is an absolute master architect.
Okay, I like where this is going.
Right, so they spend years building this magnificent, high-tech, perfectly climate-controlled mansion, and they do it entirely for their guests to live in.
Wow.
The guests are perfectly comfortable, they are catered to, they are safe, but the architect, they're sleeping out in the backyard in this, basic leaky nylon tent, and they are doing it completely willingly.
That is such a visceral image.
But here's my pushback for you. If the love they are giving to those guests is 100% authentic and it's not some performance, how is it fair to call that avoidance? I mean, isn't that just extreme generosity?
That is exactly the tension we have to navigate here. To understand why extreme generosity functions as avoidance, we have to look at the mechanical structure of Hollyella's specific psychological architecture.
Okay, break that down for me.
Well, when you examine the Great Mother archetype, you realize she gives comprehensively. She does not love in fragments. She doesn't love halfway.
So it's an all or nothing kind of deal.
Totally. When she orients herself towards someone or even, a vision or a massive creative project, she brings the full weight of her considerable interior to it. She tends to carefully inside what we can call the fortress of her interior.
The fortress of her interior. I really like that phrasing.
Yeah, and for someone built this way, giving outward is paradoxically the path of least resistance.
Wait, the path of least resistance. That sounds completely counterintuitive.
How?
I mean, giving that massive amount of energy, holding space for everyone else's complexities, that sounds exhausting. How could that possibly be the lazy or easy route?
Because the structural architecture for giving already exists inside her. Think about how this develops, usually starting in childhood or early adulthood.
Right, you learn your role early on.
Exactly. She learns that her value, her safety, her connection to others, it all comes from being useful, from
Well-
being the caretaker.
So it's like a well-worn groove.
Yes, over decades. Her neural pathways, her emotional habits, her coping mechanisms, they are all optimized for outward flow. The machinery is greased. It takes zero conscious effort for her to assess what someone else needs and just provide it.
So what is the hard part then?
The unfamiliar terrain, the deeply terrifying unknown, is what we might call the unbuilt room inside the fortress.
And that unbuilt room is where she actually has to receive something.
Yes, but not just receiving compliments or gifts from others. It is specifically receiving from herself, for herself.
Which I imagine feels totally alien.
The crucial distinction here is receiving without needing to earn it through productivity and without needing to justify it with some grand, noble purpose. Sitting in that unbuilt room and just existing is terrifying when your entire identity is based on what you can successfully construct for others.
I mean, if you aren't actively building a mansion for a guest, who even are you?
Exactly.
So the mansion is built exclusively for output. The machinery is humming perfectly as long as the products are being shipped out the front door.
Right.
But if she's outputting so much, it can't just be basic favors like helping a friend move a couch. She must be giving away the kind of deep emotional labor most people reserve entirely for themselves.
She absolutely is.
So if we crack open this massive, complex fortress, what exactly are the high-value goods she's been shipping out instead of keeping for herself?
When you actually look at the specific psychological resources Haliela is giving away, it comes down to three incredibly high-value traits. The first is consistency.
Okay, consistency.
Now, most love in our world is highly conditional. It fluctuates based on mood, behavior, or just convenience. But the consistency she offers is structural. It never wavers based on whether it is perfectly reciprocated in the moment.
Wow, that is rare.
It doesn't collapse under the weight of absence either. It doesn't require constant daily maintenance from the other person just to survive.
So even if the other person is having a bad week or pulls away slightly, her love doesn't instantly turn into resentment or panic. It just holds steady.
Exactly. It's an extraordinary gift to give someone. But here's the tragedy of the paradox. It is a steadiness she has rarely, if ever, directed at herself.
Oh, I see.
If she has a bad week or drops the ball, she doesn't offer herself that same structural consistency. She likely spirals into self-critique.
Right.
And that brings us to the second resource she gives away, which is patience. But we aren't talking about like waiting in line at the grocery store patience.
Right. This isn't just about not honking your horn in traffic.
No, this is a deep soul-level understanding. She extends a patience that honors the immense complexity of another person's experience.
Give me an example of that.
Well, if someone she cares about acts out or makes a mistake, she immediately finds the psychological frameworks and compassionate reasons to understand why they did it. She contextualizes their flaws.
I know people exactly like this.
But again, that same patient understanding, if turned inward, would immediately dissolve the harsh self-judgments she carries about herself.
So she gives everyone else the ultimate benefit of the doubt. She acts as their compassionate defense attorney, but she puts herself on trial as a ruthless prosecutor.
That is a perfect way to put it.
If you're listening right now and you find yourself constantly psychoanalyzing your friend's bad behavior to excuse them, but you beat yourself up for sleeping in on a Saturday, this is exactly what you're talking about.
Precisely. And the third resource is perhaps the most profound. It's the act of faithful witnessing.
Faithful witnessing. What does that look like in practice?
It means she sees someone's core soul architecture clearly. She sees their ultimate potential, their beauty, entirely beneath whatever messy, defensive, or chaotic surface behavior they might be presenting to the world.
And she just holds on to that.
Yes, she refuses to look away, even when their current actions actively contradict that beautiful potential.
Okay, I have to jump in here and challenge this a bit.
Go for it.
Faithful witnessing sounds highly romantic, but isn't that just a fancy poetic way of saying she wears rose-colored glasses?
I can see why you think that.
I mean, isn't she just ignoring bad behavior, bypassing their actual toxic traits, and clinging to a fantasy of who this person could be if they just went to therapy?
What's fascinating here is that we really have to distinguish this from delusion. It is not delusion.
It's not.
No, it is a genuine capacity for clear seeing. She genuinely sees their true architecture. It's an acute psychological insight, like an intuitive read on who they really are underneath the trauma.
So she's not making it up.
Not at all. The heartbreak isn't that her vision is flawed or that she's inventing things. The heartbreak is that she has been waiting for someone else to be her faithful witness.
Oh, she's waiting for reciprocity.
Yes, she is waiting for someone to look past her extreme competence, past her perfectly maintained composure, past the fact that she always has it together, and see her true vulnerability and fatigue.
Wow.
She's waiting for someone else to do the heavy lifting of seeing her, when the real developmental work is learning to hold that exact same faithful witness for herself first.
But that level of outward consistency, patience, and witnessing requires a recipient. If her whole identity and operational flow is tied to shipping these goods outward, what happens to her mental architecture when the person she's witnessing just vanishes?
That is a very dangerous moment for her.
Like when this massive, consistent outward flow suddenly hits a brick wall of blocking and silence.
This is a critical juncture. When a soul-level connection withdraws, especially with the absolute cold finality of blocked contact and sudden silence, it doesn't just create a sad void for Haliela.
What does it do?
For someone with her specific interior architecture, it triggers a very specific, deeply painful psychological loop. You have to remember, she operates primarily in two modes. She is a builder and she is a synthesizer.
So how do those two modes react to sudden silence?
Well, the builder in her looks at the sudden silence, sees a structurally broken connection, and her immediate visceral instinct is to repair it, to fix the foundation.
Makes sense. What about the synthesizer?
Simultaneously, the synthesizer in her starts frantically gathering data, analyzing past conversations, trying to understand why the structural failure occurred.
That sounds exhausting.
And here's the real kicker. Because she does not love carelessly, because she brought the full weight of her interior to this connection, she can't just magically reclassify the entire relationship as a mistake to make herself feel better.
Right. She can't just adopt that flippant attitude of, oh, well, they were trash anyway. She knows what she felt. She trusts her own clear seeing of their soul architecture.
Exactly. So the love doesn't just vanish because the person left. It stays precisely where it was.
Trapped.
Yes, it is carefully preserved inside her fortress, still firmly oriented outward toward a person who has, through their silence, communicated that they cannot or will not currently receive it.
Here's where it gets really interesting to me, to go back to our house analogy from earlier.
Let's hear it.
It's like she has left the porch light on, the central heating is blasting, the dinner is hot on the table, but the house she's directing all this energy toward has been completely boarded up. No one is coming home.
That is a great visual.
But the utilities are still running. She is racking up a massive internal utility bill for an empty house.
That is a perfect, grounded way to visualize the precise cost of this paradox. The true cost to her isn't just the emotional pain of romantic or platonic rejection.
Because she's strong enough to handle that.
Right. She's a strong person. She can navigate rejection with grace. The real devastating cost is the sustained daily direction of her finest interior resources, her patience, her witnessing, her consistency toward an empty address.
Just bleeding energy.
And while that love, that heat, that light is oriented outward toward that boarded-up house, it remains entirely unavailable to her own internal ecosystem. She is freezing in the tent while heating the empty mansion.
But she can't just flip a switch and turn her feelings off, right? You can't just delete genuine love like a computer file.
No, you can't.
Because nothing real is ever truly wasted. So if she's stuck with this massive internal heating bill, what is she supposed to do? Just suffer until the feelings naturally fade?
She doesn't have to turn it off. And she absolutely does not have to view the love she gave as wasted.
Okay, so what's the alternative?
If we connect this to the bigger picture of her psychological development, the goal isn't the destruction of the feeling. It's the rerouting of the feeling. The energy is real. It just needs a new destination.
A new destination.
Yes, which leads us to the most important pivot in her journey, what we call the question beneath the question.
Okay, what is the question beneath the question?
Well, the synthesizer in her is obsessed with asking the surface question. Why did he withdraw? What went wrong?
Which she'll never really know.
Right. That is ultimately a useless question because she will never have all the data. The more useful question, the profound question that belongs entirely to her and requires absolutely zero input from the absent person to answer, is this.
I'm listening.
What does it feel like to be loved by Hollyella Golden from the inside?
Oh, wow. So what does this all mean? That she essentially has to become the recipient of her own great mother energy. That flips the entire script.
It completely rewires her architecture. Think about it. She has endless documented evidence of what her love looks like from the outside.
Yeah, her friends, her family.
Exactly. Her creative projects, they all know exactly what her consistent, clear-seeing, fiercely patient presence feels like. But what is her own internal experience of being on the receiving end of her own patience?
Probably non-existent.
What does it feel like to be the subject of her own faithful witnessing? If the honest answer is that she rarely, if ever, experiences herself that way, then that is the unbuilt room. That is the new construction project.
So how does a master builder actually construct that? Because you can't just tell someone who is a structural architect of human connection to go take a bubble bath, light a scented candle, and say some generic affirmations in the mirror.
Oh, definitely not.
That superficial self-care isn't going to cut it for someone with this much depth.
You're entirely right. Superficial self-care would feel insulting to her intellect. The blueprint for her self-return must speak her native language. And her native language is structure, intentional building, and sustained commitment.
So what does that blueprint look like?
There is a specific three-step architectural plan for this internal pivot. First, she has to use her synthesizer's patience to gather data on her own needs.
Turning that lens inward.
Yes. She has to study her own grief, her own hidden desires, and her own profound fatigue with the exact same intense, serious attention she gives to figuring out the psychological needs of others.
She has to make herself the primary subject of her own research. She becomes her own most important project.
Second, and this is where it gets incredibly difficult for this archetype, she has to allow her emotional life to exist without immediately routing it through the machinery of productivity.
Oh, let's pause on that. That productivity aspect is a huge trap.
It really is.
I realized reading through our notes that for builders, turning emotional pain into output is just another sneakier form of avoidance.
Give me an example of what you mean.
Like if you go through a terrible breakup and instead of just crying on the couch, you immediately start a podcast about healing from heartbreak.
Yes.
Or you create a 10-step journal optimization routine so you can extract a lesson learned by Tuesday. It's a way to keep the factory running so you don't have to sit in the terrifying quiet of your own pain.
That is spot on.
So how does a builder actually construct an environment where they are allowed to just feel without producing anything useful?
This raises an important point, and it is arguably the hardest challenge for the Great Mother archetype. Constructing an environment of non-productivity requires a radical reframing of what value fundamentally means.
Meaning what, exactly?
It means recognizing that some feelings, grief, exhaustion, confusion, deserve to simply be felt. They deserve to be witnessed by her own steady presence, safely held inside the fortress, before they are ever transformed into output, advice, or a life lesson.
Just letting them be.
Yes, it is the practice of sitting in the unbuilt room and realizing the building doesn't collapse just because the factory has stopped producing goods for other people.
Which is terrifying, but also incredibly liberating. What's the third step of the blueprint?
The third part is recognizing that turning this faithfully maintained love inward doesn't magically erase or diminish her feelings for the other person who left.
Right, because we said nothing real is wasted.
Exactly. It's not about replacing one with the other. It simply expands the territory of where she is allowed to be held. She isn't destroying the love she felt. She's expanding the walls of the fortress to finally include herself in the warmth.
Creating that space of pure non-productivity where she is just witnessed and held by her own internal strength, it sounds like the greatest, most structurally sound thing she could ever build.
It truly is the ultimate architectural achievement for the Great Mother archetype. And it brings us to a really powerful, definitive truth about this entire psychological journey.
What is that?
The deepest, most sacred act for the Great Mother is not the astonishing love she is capable of giving to others. It is the moment she fully, without apology and without condition, becomes the mother of herself.
So all of this, the deep connection, the sudden silence, the agonizing psychological loop, the pain of the empty address, it wasn't really about the other person at all, was it?
No, it wasn't. The other person was just the catalyst.
Wow.
This entire chapter of her life hasn't been building toward the arrival of someone external who can finally receive and reciprocate her comprehensive love. It has been building toward the arrival of Haliela Golden into her own interior. It's the painful, necessary process of finally, irrevocably, coming home to herself.
That is incredibly profound, and I want to bring this directly back to you listening right now, because if you recognize your own reflection in this deep dive, if you are someone who naturally builds, who constantly cares, who acts as the foundational support beam for everyone around you, it might be time to take a hard, honest look at your own interior architecture.
Absolutely.
Look closely at where your finest psychological resources are being shipped right now. Are you living in a leaky tent in the backyard while you meticulously maintain a mansion for everyone else? Are you paying an astronomical emotional utility bill for an address where no one is currently home?
It's a pivotal realization. It is time to stop waiting for someone else to finally be your faithful witness.
Because you already have everything you need.
The resources you need are already inside your fortress. They just need to be rerouted. So I will leave you with this final thought to mull over today. If you were to walk into the quiet, unbuilt room of your own interior fortress right now, what is the very first brick you would lay to begin mothering yourself?